Welcome to the JKWD podcast, where we discuss better humanhood and help you dominate your world. I'm Josh.
And I'm Kelvin, and today we're going to talk to you about some really good stuff. But first, a word from our sponsors.
We're brought to you today by Vitamin K Daily. Go over to vitaminkdaily.com, get yourself 4 weeks free. Also, swing by the site, the show notes for this episode, and click through, go to On It, use our portal there, go get yourself some Alpha Brain, some Shroom Tech Sport. Get your mind going, get your body going, get yourself some exercise equipment or some clothing if you want, or use our Amazon portal. Doesn't cost you anything extra, but they kick us a little on the back end when you buy anything you were going to buy anyway. Get yourself some Maxwell House coffee, get yourself a drone, get yourself whatever you were going to get yourself. Just do it on our link. That'll keep the lights on at this show. And now, here we go.
Well, that's a cool thing. All right.
So, Kelvin, what are you drinking today?
You know what? It's just my own home. It's just coffee. It's Maxwell House, a little stronger than usual, because the hot spiced tea sweet tea was too hot, spiced, and sweet. So I had to go back to boring coffee because I grew up on this stuff, I guess.
Yeah, I got my little supermarket brand coffee here.
Yeah, you got a bigger cup than me.
Yeah, well, I need it more than you do. Your brain works on less coffee.
Oh, constant coffee.
Hey, if anybody's listening, hey, you have a coffee company and you want to be a coffee sponsor, we'll gladly try your coffee.
Oh yeah, we'll do that.
Talk about it, yeah.
Yeah. We need some good coffee because don't get me wrong, Maxwell House is all right, but they don't give me an affiliate link. No. Maybe I should look that up. I haven't looked that up yet. So
I bet you can find one through Amazon.
That might work. Oh, we gotta do some brainstorming. We gotta talk now.
Yeah.
All right. So what are we gonna talk about here? This is not the first time we met. This story we want to talk about today. This was not. How long have we known each other? Back in 2009 when I wrote this thing.
Well, we've probably known each other 5-6 years at that point, anyway, right?
Yeah, it must have been.
Yeah, right about then. So yeah, at that time it was. Yeah, I invited very few people into that apartment. It was a tiny little apartment I had. That might have been 700 square feet.
Oh, that was the tiny one.
Yeah, you had to come up.
The stove took up most of it because you were cooking.
Yeah, so you had to come up this covered staircase that it was the only entrance. So if there was a fire or something, you had to just jump out the second story window because there was no way you were getting down that thing. It was a wood staircase with a narrow wood cover on it.
I remember that. And we had to come in through the back parking lot, and it looked like I was about to break into your place to get in it.
Yeah. And, but the worst thing for a visitor was, you were coming in through the kitchen. So if I was standing there, then I had a long warning that you were coming. And I was standing above you for a long time because that was a fairly long staircase.
It was that. Too bad I didn't
watch you come up
back then.
Yeah, really. But anyway, I had you over for breakfast, right? It was probably steak and eggs.
It was pretty sweet. I'm like, I'm going to go to Josh's house at breakfast, and he's a bachelor, and he's going to cook me breakfast, and that's probably the way that's going to be because I was a bachelor and I cooked breakfast and I wasn't inviting too many people over for that. But as it turned out, surprisingly good, as a matter of fact. That was the biggest steak I'd ever seen in my life, I think. And that was a pretty good. So, and with this other thing you did, this double-brewed coffee, as I recall, and I'm like,
oh yeah,
what do you mean?
Yeah, so I would make a pot of coffee, and then I'd cool down that pot of coffee, and then I'd put a fresh filter in and fresh grounds, and then instead of brewing a pot of water, I'd brew that first cup of coffee again. I pour that
I
first
think
cup
that
of
was
coffee.
before running to Starbucks. I I was awake.
You probably didn't have to worry about lubing up the tubes for the next week.
I hear you. We're getting that mechanical thing again.
It'll go away. It keeps going away. So.
All right. So anyway, I can cut that out. Yeah. So that was pretty good.
Yeah, but then so we're sitting in the living room after breakfast. I think you had that blue chair.
Oh, pretty good.
Yeah, that chair's gone now.
And is it?
Yeah, it's gone.
I didn't know too much about you then. So Matt, matter of fact, I don't know too much about you now. But I remember I went into this place and there were 2 guitar cases, and I'm like, well, he's only got 2 hands. And I remember asking you about, hey, you got 2 guitar cases. And one of the things I always liked about you was a Class A smart Alec.
Still am.
And do you remember your answer to me that day?
That must have been something like it. Must have been something like it's easier to hold 2 guitars.
No, it was like, well, you got 2 guitars, you got 2 guitar cases. And I'm like, oh, well, how understood.
Yeah, it sounds about right.
How about that? A very direct guy. But, and then I didn't know what you'd done as a background, so I guess we got talking about your guitar stuff. And then you started telling me about this album that you had made some years ago. And I'm like, oh, well, where is it? You made an album and I don't have it. I love knowing famous people. You know how that is, because I'm a name dropper. I'm one of those guys, and you wouldn't let me have it. And you said something that was very profound to me at that time. You said, "No, I'm not going to let you have that because that music is no longer representative of who I am." And that kind of stopped me in my tracks a little bit, because that was an amazing comment. When you take somebody like me, I'm a life coach, and I keep teaching people about changing their lives and stuff all the time. And most of the time, I mean, I've met so many people who are living and doing what they're doing because somebody else wanted them to. I'm a photographer too, and I'd go to take pictures of people, and they'd say stuff like, well, I can't do that because, so-and-so expects this, or, they're already doing things all over their lives that they're doing not because they wanted to, but because somebody else had an expectation of them, and it wasn't even necessarily somebody that they knew. So when you say to me that day, it's no longer representative of who I am, I'm like, wow, that is cool. How the heck did he do that? So how did you come by changing that? I mean, who were you back then, and what did you change into, and what was so significant about that change, that difference now that you won't even like play the music? Let me have it.
Well, it's just, growth in the passage of years, really. I mean, think about what music is to you, right? Music is something that it speaks to you in the moment you hear it, first of all, right? So if you think back on your favorite songs, most of them are not favorite songs because of anything intrinsic in the song. They're your favorite songs because either the words spoke to you at the time, or you first heard them in a particular surrounding.
Yeah, it's true.
Right. So And as you grow, even let's say it is, let's say it is a lyric or a riff that means something to you when you're 18, 19, 20. It's going to mean something a little different to you when you're 28, 29, 30. Going to mean something a lot different to you when you're 50. Right? You've had some perspective. So for me, the same thing. I wrote most of those songs. I was 18, 19, 20, 21. And time. Not a lot of time has to go by before you're no longer 18, 19, 20, 21, right?
About 15 minutes in my case.
Yeah, well, 2009, I would have been, I turned 33 that year. So I was not, it's not that I had decades of life behind me, decades of perspective, but I had enough perspective, behind me by then that just, the person who wrote those songs is not really the same person. I mean, along a linear line, like with the same body and the same brain, it was just, somewhere different in my development as a human. It's not that I didn't write those songs at a particular time. It's just that, okay, well, I had that part of me, and the place where those songs came from, some of it was certainly still with me, but the whole thing as a collection just was not. Not only was it something that, if I were to sit down and write another record, it wouldn't be anything like that. And not only would it not be anything like that lyrically, wouldn't be anything like that musically. It wouldn't have any of the same themes, probably. It's just, it was somebody coming back to the same river 10 years later. Right? It's somebody, you never stick your foot in the same river twice, because you're never the same river. You're never the same person. So, think of it just coming back a decade later and how different that river is. After move into a strange city and meeting all kinds of new people, and I went from having lived outside the house for having moved out of my parents' house for a little bit here and a little bit there for the last couple of years, to living in a city 4 hours away for the first time. And it's like I picked up, in the 5-6 years I had known you by then, I picked up piles of experience that I didn't have the 10 years before when I wrote the record.
Well,
so, it just wasn't the same human, and I don't think that giving you the record letting you hear it would have given you some good insight into who I was 10 years before or 8 years before. Don't think that would have done either of us any good.
I suppose that's true. But I know so many people who never moved past who they were then. Or if they moved past who they were, back then, they stayed there because there were people in their lives that knew who they were then and didn't want to accept a new identity. And it takes a lot of strength to move past who you are at any stage, in my opinion.
That's true. It does.
To move past who you are. So, I was quite stunned by then, because, and like I wrote back in 2009, there's so many people who are tied very strongly to identities that no longer reflect who they are, and they're trapped inside them, and they feel they can't change. So,
well, if they're trapped inside them, then they do represent who they are, and they might wish they didn't, right? Just they're afraid to go ahead and say, look, I want to be somebody else. I want to change.
Yeah. And I know people like that, and I've known people like that. So You inspired me that day. As a matter of fact, that was probably one of the best blog posts I ever wrote. And I went home and thought about that. And you know what? What came up to me was, you know what? I may not be that same person I was at a particular point in time, but I reserve the right to change. And I've taught that and promoted that you as an individual have to reserve your right and stand by your right to change and not be who you were, because you need to reserve. And you know what? I'm just going to read this because this is how it goes. I reserve the right to not be the person I was years ago. I reserve the right to be someone other than the person you thought I was back then. I reserve the right to become different, to become stronger, learn more, grow more, and get better. I reserve the right to leave behind any identity that does not empower me. And it was a very moving day for me, actually, because I probably had some spots in my life I hadn't moved past at the time, and that gave me a lot of inspiration to get past them. And the last statement I had in here was, you know what? To myself, dear self, I am not that old self-limiting person that I used to be. That image of me is no longer representative of who I am. And I know you just said, well, if you're trapped inside it, then it is. But, recognition is always the first step. Once someone helps you realize that you're not moving in the direction that you want to go in, that's the place that you realize, you know what, I need to be something else. So when you get there, well, for you, you said it was a gradual change for you, but I mean, was there a point in time that you just realized, you know what, that's whatever that was, that's not me anymore. That's not important to me anymore. That doesn't represent what I think anymore. Were there any that you can remember, any epiphanies that made you go, you know what, let's be different?
Well, I don't know that there was a moment when all of a sudden it stopped being that, but I was probably picking up my guitar and playing one of those songs and saying, wow, I would never write this today. And just, it would never occur to me. It would never be a subject I touch. And at that point, if I wasn't interested in playing it for me, then nobody else needed it either. And, I think having people around who will let you have that change is important. Mm-hmm. Because one of the things that I had stopped doing at that point was performing publicly. I ran a series of concerts for a little while in Massachusetts before I moved up to Central New York. Small coffee house, but it meant that I had a 4-second set or like a 4-song set, and every week I'd try to write one new song, and then I would try to play at least one of somebody's favorites. So at some point you get sick of at some point I would get sick of that. Of playing the same song over and over. And side note, I've asked people about that, and some people love it. Joan Jett is known for "I Love Rock and Roll," and she has to play that every show she plays, even now. 35 years after it first hit the radio, and she's like, "I love it. Like, how can you not love ending your night with 1,000 or 5,000 or 10,000 people singing your song with you?" They spend the whole night yelling it out, and they're having a great time, and they want to sing it with you. Like, awesome. I did not get to that point. And so if I wasn't enjoying that, then, why would I want to keep doing it? When I moved to Syracuse, I got involved in a poetry open mic. So I was doing more spoken word, and I also was, I play a song every now and then, and there were a couple of nights, the host said, "Why don't you bring your guitar and do a feature set in the middle?" Like people really like that stuff. So I did that, and eventually I kind of got, I didn't like the pressure of having to come up with new stuff, and I didn't like playing the old stuff, and I said, what, this just isn't me anymore. So that's kind of what I moved on from, and you have to be willing to leave some people behind when that happens too, I guess, because there are people. It's not that we've had arguments about it. It's just that, like, when you change, and like you leave an activity behind that you were seeing people from, then you're going to leave those people behind, and you're going to grow apart, and it's just be nice to catch up with you every now and then. But if we don't, like, that's okay. Like, we bonded over this particular thing, and one of us is no longer doing that particular thing anymore.
Yeah, I've had that happen. But I've had that happen in any phase of life. I think when you're just deciding not to do that. I used to be a musician, but I won't even talk about that. I won't call it a musician. But I mean, I joined the military at 17, so my life was a little bit different than a lot of people's, and I had a whole different structure until I was 37 when I retired. So there was some things that going on in the world that I kind of missed, but by the same token, there's a lot of other stuff I've done. But being in the motivational realm, when you decide that there's going to be a change in your life, there's people you're going to lose, because there are people who expect you to never ever change. You're going to be the person you were when they first met you, however many years ago that was, and there are some people who don't move past that. And when you move past that, it makes them uncomfortable. It makes them uncomfortable. Probably more so with themselves, because we get used to what we get used to. So this may be kind of a weird and off the wall kind of a question, but if you knew somebody who was in that situation, the situation where, I know you just said you're going to lose people, do you have any particular advice or perspective, I'll say, because sometimes people don't like advice, but they might not. They might like a perspective that you'd want to pass on.
Well, the perspective I have on this is that first thing you need to do is to be comfortable with yourself, because you're going to have a transition period where you lose some people, and before you become what you're going to become, you're going to, eventually you're going to have new people in your life when you become what's next for you. But you're going to have a period where you're going to be kind of on your own, feeling stuff around, and there will be a few people around, but you're going to be missing a chunk of people. So, be willing to go some of it alone. Have your good friends that you can fall back on. You're always going to have people in your life who are going to be there for you, and with you through all the changes and whatever happens. But you're gonna lose a chunk of people when you move from one thing on to the next, and it's going to be a while before you gain another chunk of people. That's something both my wife Jenny and I have experienced recently. Right, we moved 1,000 miles away to Savannah. We know my parents 2 hours away, but we were coming pretty much not knowing anybody, and Jen without a job. So we knew when we left Central New York we were going to leave some people behind that we were going to fall out of touch with. But then we'd have people like you. We still we went from having lunch every 2 weeks to getting on Skype every week or two. We're not using Skype.
And now we're drinking coffee in the morning instead of beer. So I don't know. Was that forward movement, Josh? I don't.
I don't know. Well, I mean, as summer comes, I'll get up earlier and go for my my runs, and I might have an occasional beer while we're doing this, but
Oh, you're gonna get me running
there's no
beer. Oh, that's healthy for me.
but there is no getting up at 6:00 in the morning and getting myself together to go for a run when it's 40 degrees out and just getting light.
Oh man, you just missing it. Because I get up at 6:00 all the time and look outside and see people running. I'm not one of them because
right, exactly. You look outside. They're nuts.
It's a whole lot healthier for me indoors, I'm thinking.
Well, yesterday I went for a long run in the rain. It was 55 and raining, but it was like 10:30 in the morning, and I said, "Screw it!" I put on a little rain slicker and went out and ran 12 miles, and every like quarter mile, every like 3 minutes, every 2.5, 3 minutes, I had to empty my sleeves.
Ring out, yeah.
Yeah, and I got home. Those clothes are still wet.
Well, there you go. There you go.
Yeah, at least it wasn't cold. Yeah, not that 55 is warm, but it's not. Yeah, it's not 30.
Yeah, we still got people here doing a polar bear challenge. I still think they're nuts.
Yep, I agree. Of course, I'll be out there. They probably think the same of me when I'm out there in the summer, and it's 102 with 98% humidity, and I'm out there running 8, 10, 12 miles on it. So
yeah. Well, we question your sanity from time to time, but yeah, and that's a big change from who you were before. Because I remember when you just sit around and do not a lot. So, for the listeners, you need to reserve the right to change and be something different, because you don't have to be who you always were. Now, don't get me wrong. If you like who that person was, who that person is, and they still fit who you are, what you're doing, and how you're feeling about life and yourself, then absolutely you are still that same person. But some people need other growth paths. So when you run across that, don't be afraid to make the change. It'll be very rewarding and be happier with yourself.
Yeah, and similarly, if you got a friend who needs to get out of the rut and become a new becoming, and let them do it. And if you're willing to see them through it, and if you're not, be willing to get out of their way, let them do it.
Yeah, and there is that. I've seen a lot of people who get married young and grow into, or not even necessarily young, and end up growing into different people because life just changes. It's difficult sometimes inside a close relationship like that when one partner wants to do something else, to be something else than the person knew they were. And it's even more important in those relationships to be supportive, provided they're not, well, I suppose there's conditions, but that's one of those things, do you support growth of your partner and change, or do they have to like stay stuck at whoever that was you met when you were 17? Because I got to tell you, I am not the guy I was at 17. I'm not even sure I'm the same guy I was at 55. We constantly move and we constantly change and we constantly find out things. So change is a part of life, in my opinion, or in my experience. So you have to be willing to allow change, and in a lot of cases you have to be willing to change. And once you decide you want to change, I understand that takes courage. So, find people who support you in that. There's a lot of people that don't want you to change. And unfortunately, sometimes you just have to let those people go. We said that already, right?
Yeah, if you got to let people go, you got to let people go.
Let those people go, but you will find other people who are supportive, and life will be good. So, what do you think? Should we have him? Should we have him send us questions to answer? Or
Oh yeah, people can chime in. They
let's
can
sleep in.
just and anybody wants to, they can comment on the show notes. And
Yeah, there you go.
they can get in touch through the website. There's a contact form, jkwdpodcast.com. Hey, before we wind up, you reading anything good? Listening to anything good?
I what I've been listening to lately is jazz.
Anything in particular?
I put on my what do you want to call it? My Pandora every once in a while. And it's something that come by and just really tripped my trigger. And most recently, it was an album by see now, because names don't stick with me. I got to figure out who the heck it was. Give me a minute. I'll figure it out. Wayman Tisdale, right? And because I haven't watched television since whatever, and news, and I'm not a sports fan and stuff like that, but I became enamored with this album. It was called Hang Time, and it's one song that I just really, really loved. And strangely enough,
and we appear to have lost some audio.
I still have it here.
Okay, I got you back now.
All right, but anyway, Wayman Tisdale and Hang Time, and that was just a really nice album. And as it turns out, unfortunately, this gentleman passed away in like 2009, I think. So I was sad, actually. I'm like, oh, what an incredible talent. And plus, I understand he was one tremendous basketball player. A couple of people knew him who came through. So after his basketball career, he started playing bass, or he continued playing bass since he became accomplished musician in that regard too. And that's the guy that I got to know. But once I found out that he was gone, it's like, man, what a bummer that is. But his music is awesome. So if you get a chance to listen to, if you're a jazz person, Wayman Tisdale and his album Hang Time, the one song was the one that actually got me in it, and I listened to it over and over and over because it just kind of resonated with me technically. So, and
we'll get that in the show notes too. So,
yeah,
we'll get that in the show notes too. So,
yeah, we'll do that. That was awesome. So, as far as other reading, we'll save that for the next podcast.
Okay. I recently found Doug Stanhope's podcast. Doug Stanhope's a stand-up comedian who I don't even know how to describe him as how he comes across as a human, but I think he's almost always drunk or popping pills on the podcast, and he's one of those old time cigarette smokers, like my grandmother was, who just something goes wrong and he's got to be in a hospital for a little bit or whatever. He'll just when can I get out and light up again? My grandmother once, I remember she broke her hip.
Ow!
And she went into the hospital for like 3 weeks. They wouldn't let her out of bed. And, by the time she was finally well enough for us to let her visit her, they let us take her outside in a wheelchair, and she's like, "Give me a cigarette." Like, you haven't had a cigarette in 3 weeks. Isn't it time to just quit? Like, no, give me a cigarette.
Oh man, yeah.
But you remember those people?
I remember those people. I used to work at the hospital over here, and I would see people who were coming down off the cancer wards and stuff, and they'd have stomas, but they'd be smoking
through them.
Yeah, smoking through the stoma, 30 below. I'm like, oh, that's dedication.
Yeah.
Or whatever you want to call that. So, but yeah, so life is good there, Mr. Shear.
All right, we'll talk to you soon, and we'll see all you people out there too.
All right.
Well, friends, that's it for this week. Thanks for listening. You can find us online at jkwdpodcast.com. Follow us on Twitter at jkwdpodcast, and like us on Facebook at facebook.com/jkwdpodcast.
Don't forget to leave us a review on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, or wherever you get your podcasts, and definitely tell your friends about us. Our closing music is by Dysfunctional, featuring Misjudged. See you next week.
When you're surrounded by darkness, open your eyes. Look around you. It's a beautiful life. Don't waste time. Open your mind. Have no regrets. Paint the sky your favorite color. Your favorite color.